Welcome to Seek, Go, Create, the Leadership Journey, the podcast for Christian entrepreneurs and faith-driven leaders who want to redefine success. I'm your host, Tim Winders, and here we explore how to lead with purpose, build businesses with integrity, and align your work with your faith. Whether you're navigating challenges, seeking fulfillment, or striving to make an impact, this is your space to grow, innovate, and create a life that matters. Let's dive in. How can faith-driven organizations not only survive, but thrive in today's marketplace? Meet Justin Eklund, a branding expert, author, and speaker dedicated to answering this question. With over 25 years in advertising, Justin has crafted a unique niche by merging faith with business to create compelling brand identities that drive both profit and purpose. His book, Brand for Impact, serves as a roadmap for leaders looking to infuse their spiritual values into their professional ventures, promising not just economic success, but eternal impact. We'll explore how Justin's approach helps organizations elevate their mission and achieve sustainable growth. Justin, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be on.
I'm excited that you're on too. You're coming in from a cold climate. I'm in the warmth, so we'll see if we can merge these two together and have some fun. I just read your book over the last few days, so we're going to have fun with branding and impact and purpose and business and lots of cool things. Before we jump in, though, this is not even really a good icebreaker question anymore, but it's kind of a deep thing. So I'm going to give you a choice. What would you prefer to answer? What do you do? Kind of like the icebreaker-y question. Or who are you? Choose and start answering.
I think those questions go together for me. So I'm going to start with who I am, which will lead into what I do. I've been doing marketing and advertising my entire life. It seems like from a young age, I was selling things out on the corner and doing fundraisers and trying to be an entrepreneur even from a very young age. And I think that's always been in my blood. And then my parents are both artists. And so that creativity piece has always been a part of who I am as well. And in high school, I went to a Christian youth conference called Christ in Youth. And the last day, there was an invitation to come forward if you felt like God was calling you into full-time vocational ministry. And for some reason, I felt that tug on my heart, and I felt like this is a big decision, but I feel like God wants me to do this. So I went forward, made that commitment. I had no idea what that was going to entail in my life, but I knew God wanted me to be involved in ministry professionally somehow. So I went to Bible college, discovered quickly that God was not calling me to be a preacher or a missionary or a youth pastor. And so I was a little, confused, wondering, okay, God, you called me into ministry, but this doesn't seem like this is where you want me to be. So prior to that, I had done some internships with advertising agencies and decided, that's interesting to me. So at least I'm going to get my degree. Came back here to Wichita State University, got a degree in marketing and advertising, started climbing the corporate ladder, doing all the things you do in the advertising world, and really became experienced and talented at writing strategic marketing plans for organizations, for companies, and helping them succeed. So, this seemed like this is kind of who God's created me to be. I'm thriving in business and in creativity and in this area of advertising. So long story short, God called me in a really cool way to a missions organization called YWAM. I didn't know, it felt like a detour from my professional path, but I felt like I couldn't say no. It was also in Maui, Hawaii, so that didn't hurt. So I went there, did 3 months of training in Maui, and then the plan was to go to the Philippines for 3 months and minister to the surf culture. Well, there were a lot of California people on my team, and they were much better surfers than I was, being from Kansas. So I ended up in India. They needed a worship leader, and so I went on the India team and had the most incredible 3 months of my life, just ministering to, making friends with some of the most gracious, humble, generous people I've ever met. So that was my missions foray. They asked me to stay on and do communications and marketing for them. And I did that for a while. Really felt called back to Wichita, which it's only God if He can move you from Hawaii back to Kansas, right? So came back here, met my wife. I was playing in a worship band. I looked down from the stage and there was this light coming down from heaven and, this beautiful woman down there. So came down, met my wife. We were, 6 months later, we were married and we've been married almost 26 years now, which is pretty awesome. And she had a job at the time. And so my friend started a medical missions nonprofit and he said, would you come and do development and marketing for me for free? I'm like, okay. That doesn't seem like, again, the career path is not going in the direction I thought it was going to go. But I really felt like God was saying that He wanted me to do this. So I did, got him really off to a strong start. Music has been a part of this journey. Ended up leading worship for a youth group in town. And my friend who was the youth pastor, as soon as I got there, he left. And they said, all right, would you stay and be the youth pastor for a while? And then after that, we think we'd like you to do communications for us. And we don't have a job and it's not even going to be full time. And we don't know if it's going to work out, but we know this is what you do. And we would love you to do it for us here at the church. So after my wife and I prayed about it, we did it. And looking back in retrospect, I had a front row seat to watch God grow that little church of 500 to over 5,000 in 14 years with 5 campuses and tremendous life change, tremendous impact. And all of that is just really God's leading and God's guidance. And somehow I had the good sense or the courage to be obedient to where He was leading me, even when it didn't make sense. So that was marketing and ministry all wrapped into one. And looking back, you're like, hey, God, this is what you called me to do. So 10 years ago, we felt like, hey, we've done what God called us to do here at the church. Now we feel like He's calling us into the marketplace to help purpose-driven leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs really make a greater kingdom impact through the work that they do, not only in ministry, but in the marketplace, and really helping them understand that they can see their work as a sacred activity and really grow their business, whatever it is, glorify God at the same time. And then at the same time, really infuse their faith into their brand and have a more impactful presence in the marketplace and be more successful ultimately. So our company, Grove 9, is 10 years old. We've been doing that for the past 10 years. And it's just been a neat journey to look back and see God's faithfulness throughout every step of the journey.
Well, one thing that's curious to me, you mentioned that both your parents were artists. What type artists were your parents?
So fine arts, painting, and they both had fine arts degrees. So
Were in the marketplace at all, or were they in education, or were they creating that? I guess I'm trying to get to, you mentioned you were selling things at a young age and things like that in a family of 2 artists. So help me connect a few dots right there. Let's take a short break from the show. Think about the leader you are today and the leader you want to become. Hello, I'm Tim Winders, your guide to personal and professional transformation. In my executive coaching sessions, we dive deep into what it means to be a truly impactful leader, one who leads not just with skills, but with vision and faith. Through my coaching, leaders have redefined their approach, achieving not just success, but also purpose and joy in their work. Are you ready for this kind of transformation? Let's explore your potential together. Schedule your free discovery coaching call at timwinders.com/coaching. Your leadership journey is just beginning. Now back to Seek, Go, Create.
yeah, I think that the artistic DNA is just part of who God made me to be. They weren't commercial successes or teachers or anything like that. They just enjoyed art. God has given them talent for drawing and painting and creating. I got a little bit of that, but I also got this business side. Really interesting. When I went to college for advertising, you kind of have to choose. Are you going to be an artist and a designer, or are you going to be more on the business side of things? I was really torn because I enjoyed both of those. And now running my own agency, it's been really cool to be able to do the strategy and also be involved in the creative execution.
Mm. So this is the part of the episode where if any of our parents are listening, I'll say maybe turn it off for a minute. I don't want to throw parents under the bus, but both my parents were educators. I thought that I was going to be a coach and teacher, et cetera, until I found out how much money my dad made, and I didn't realize we were poor. But did any of the desire for financial success drive you at a younger age? And specifically, did you see something in your parents that you desired or possibly didn't want to be that way growing up? And again, we've already asked the parents not to listen in, so we're not blaming them on
You know, I
anything.
no, that's a great question. I do think that at that intersection during college, everyone told me you can be a starving artist or you can be in business and maybe be financially more successful. So I'd be lying if I said that didn't enter into the equation at all.
Well, I think that's part of our journey, and I think sometimes as people of faith, we don't want to admit that, but that was what drove me in the '80s, man. I was go, go, go '80s. I was gonna make me some money, and that was what the Lord used to get my attention because I was saved in more of a business setting than even in a church setting. So I think it's okay because then what happens is later in life, the Lord uses that like he's using you right now and all to kind of bring some of these things together. You brought up, so this is a good time to ask this question. You brought up that you were around a church for a number of years and then it grew, and I'm sure your role and probably your job and pay and different things like that hopefully went up. I sometimes get a little bit snarky about church world. It's like, we've got this great talent, but you need to serve the Lord. You need to do it for free here. But then you kind of left there and went into marketplace. I think this would be a good time to put a stake in the ground. And I want to ask, contrast the differences that you saw at that time, or maybe even today, I guess, between traditional church world and marketplace.
Yeah. You know, I think there's a misperception out there between the sacred and the secular. I think that many business owners, business people in the church feel like their job is maybe less spiritual than the pastor. And I think that's really important to dispel that myth. And I've grown in my understanding and my belief on that as well. And, you know, God's the author of work and he invented it, he created it. And therefore, it is a sacred activity. And, you know, the Bible talks about if we're doing it to his glory, then that's also part of what he's created us to do. So I really wanted to not redeem is too strong of a word, but when we started this company, I really wanted to help Christian business owners understand that your work is just as sacred and just as impactful for eternity as the person on the stage giving the sermon.
Mm. So you mentioned you went to Bible school. I went to Bible school a few years ago, about 7 or 8 years ago. And just to kind of throw a little bit of gas on that fire, I just got started with this divide between marketplace and full time ministry type things. I noticed that there was a real pecking order with the way they talked about certain roles. You know, it's kind of like the missionary to a third world country is number one. I do want to say that a missionary to Maui, though, I'm not sure where that would fall in the pecking order, and especially to surfers. Come on. I mean, that's like, I don't want to get off track, but good gracious, that got me thinking about things. And then, then it was maybe evangelist, pastor, et cetera, et cetera. And then, you know, businessman, used car salesman, lawyer. That's like the pecking order and all that. And did you notice that when you were going through your schooling? I think your Bible school was probably at a younger age than mine was.
Yeah, I think there's some perception of that out there. And yeah, it all comes back to that idea that, you know, what is ministry? And, you know, understanding that everything that we put our hand to the glory of God can be and should be ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been doing a read through the Gospels and, the 12 that Jesus picked to hang out that got this big party that we're celebrating in now started, none of them were the scholars and the biblical, religious people of the day. They were fishermen, tax collectors, and zealots and other type. They would be the
Mm.
entrepreneurs of the world. How long did you say you were in the church setting that went from 500 to 5,000?
Yeah, over 14 years.
Wow. All right. So you learned a ton there. Tell me some real takeaways you had, maybe just about organization and organizational growth in general, but then maybe drop down and talk about what you've learned in that environment that fed into, the last 10 years in branding for impact and things like that. Because I'm sure you saw a lot of things that worked really well and you probably had your hands in it, and then maybe some things that didn't. So just take some
Mm.
time and talk about that experience because I think there's a lot to learn there.
Yeah. A church as a nonprofit organization is different than a marketplace organization. And so I think there's a lot you can learn about how to grow and I think healthy things grow. And I think God uses our intellect and our strategy, what he's put that inside of us in addition to just our heart. Right. And so he wants us to be thinking Christians, and he wants us to be strategic, and he wants us to use all of the faculties that he's given us to move his kingdom forward. So understanding that growth mindset isn't a bad thing, I think is important. A church grows through really the people that believe in the mission. Life change. We were constantly telling stories of how God was transforming people's lives. And it all comes down to your why. It comes down to what you believe and what you're called to do. And when your why resonates with your audience's why, you're going to have a really wonderful, strong connection and community that you're going to be able to build. And I think that's true in the church, and that's true in the business world and in the nonprofit world as well. So telling stories of life change, telling stories of transformation, that's how you engage people's hearts and ultimately engage their resources, which is so closely tied to our hearts. And I think that's really important for any nonprofit to understand when you're asking for money, when you're trying to raise funds, when you're doing development, when you're looking for volunteers. It's got to be about the why and the mission and the calling. And then all of those other things fall into place.
One of the things when we get into marketing and even branding and sales, and you just mentioned the word growth, all of those things, for people with certain personalities, mine, it can sometimes be a slippery slope, Justin, where you begin going down a path where you say something to the effect of, well, if we had more revenue or if we had more people in the seats, we could have a bigger impact, we could have a bigger budget, we could do more. And so then we begin justifying certain tactics or techniques, and I'll throw this word out here, manipulation, possibly in the arena that you may operate in. How can we keep those things in check? And again, I know you may have been in a church environment that you're still connected with, so I don't want you to say negative about them,
Mhm.
but I like to have candid conversations here. What are some
Yeah.
challenges in a local church that's going through growth? They believe that they've got a call to church their town or their area, and there's certain ways you could do things that might be shortcuts or things like that. Talk a little bit about that challenge.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to the heart of the leader. And that's that's really the most important thing. Are we serving God with integrity, with excellence, with honesty? I can talk about this later, but we founded our company on the fruit of the spirit in the book of Galatians. And I think if a church is following and growing in the fruit of the spirit, that's going to help inform those decisions. It's going to help their motives be pure, and a lot of times in the church, there's this idea church stealing or, member stealing or taking somebody from this church. And, that was, that's not a healthy thing. That's not something that I think sincere churches are ever trying to do. I think the statistics are overwhelming in terms of the number of unchurched in our communities. There are so many who are not connected to a faith fellowship in any way. And there's so much opportunity out there, and people resonate with different styles and different methods and different denominations. And, I think it's important for a church to have the greatest influence that it can and build as much awareness as possible and say, this is who we are. This is what we believe. And this is how we do it. And if that's interesting to you, you know, come and be a part of it. Come check it out and see what happens. So you never want growth for growth's sake. You want to always have growth for kingdom purposes. And, it's about leading people to Christ and helping them grow into fully devoted followers. And I think if that's your heart and that informs that's the lens that you make decisions through, I think that's going to keep a church on track.
One thing that fascinates me, and you did a great job in the book, Brand for Impact. I've got it right over here. It's the reason I'm glancing over there. Got it on my Kindle here. One of the things you did a great job of is you went through some techniques and all, which was awesome, but you also brought some stories in of real world leaders that are out doing this. I'll make a statement, then I'll let you respond to it. One of the things I observe, because I work with nonprofits and also work with for-profit, and my observation is this. In the nonprofit world, many times leaders struggle with bringing in what I'll term as Babylonian or worldly techniques, methods, etc., to function and operate and grow their organization. In the for-profit world, what I notice is they're operating in the Babylonian system and they're attempting to lead with faith and, like you mentioned, the gifts of the Spirit and things like that. I'll kind of frame that and just maybe let you respond because I know you work with both. What do you see related to that also? Similar tension or some different things?
Hmm. I think there are so many faith-driven leaders in the marketplace who desire and feel a calling to do more with their business. There's something inside of them saying, I wish I could share my faith or express my faith in a more profound way through the thing that I do with the majority of my life, right? We spend so much of our time at work, and yet there seems to be this chasm between their personal life and their faith expression and then what they do for a living, their business. And, there are reasons that we uncovered during the research for why that's true. But yeah, more often than not, we just saw leaders who were so hesitant to let those two worlds touch.
And so obviously you interviewed and spoke to a number of them that are able to merge those together. What are some things that you observed in those people that appear to or are doing it well?
Yeah. Courage is the big one. And I think that's the leaders who have really done it well have said, this is who we are. This is who I am. I'm the leader of the organization. And this is what I believe. And this is what God's calling me to do with this business, with this company. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, then, we'll figure something else out. If I'm going to be in business and I'm going to have a platform, I'm going to make sure that God is represented clearly in what I do. And I think that's the first step is just having the willingness to really take a stand and say, this is what it's going to be. We're going to be unashamed about expressing our faith and the purpose that gets us up every morning and leads us to do what we do, building widgets with excellence and with integrity. The reason we do it ultimately is to glorify God, and we're not going to be afraid to say it. We're going to close on Sunday, and if it hurts our business, it hurts our business. And we've all seen how that's worked out for Chick-fil-A.
I'm from Atlanta originally. I've been to their headquarters And I don't eat a lot of fast food anymore. Some people might say it's blasphemous not to get you a good old godly chicken sandwich every once in a while. I'm not totally sure I agree with that. However, yesterday my wife was out and about, had some errands to run. I was doing some work and she brought me a 12 pack of nuggets in. And truthfully, they were quite divine. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And true of
They do a great job.
Kathy spoke at her graduation when she graduated at Georgia State University a few years ago.
Wow.
So one of the things that's interesting is fascinating to me as I get to prepare and study up on the leaders and people like you that I talk to. I read your book this week, Brand for Impact. We're going to talk more about it here in just a moment. And I'm also preparing for next week's guest. I believe that's when it'll fall. It's Ken Gosnell. And he works with CEOs that are working towards being well done. I mean, not being well done, but at the end of their journey, they can say it was well done. And we know what the reference to that scripture is. Being well done. That might have been an interesting slip of the tongue there. But you use the word, and it came up in his book too. So it's like rolling around in my head quite a bit. And it's a word that means quite a bit to me. And it's the word stewardship. I really see a lot of leaders, both in profit and nonprofit, that aren't doing well, that aren't getting the message of well done that we'll talk about in next week's episode, that are not stewards. They really perceive themselves as owners of everything in the organization. But the ones that seem to do well, they treat their organization more as they're a steward of it and they don't own it. And you talk about that a good bit in your book. Talk about stewardship.
Mm. There's some tremendous examples out there of business leaders who have done this well. And one of the companies that we interviewed, metal forging company called Weldaloy, he was inspired by reading a book called God Owns My Business by Stanley Tam. It's such a wonderful example of that idea of stewardship, right? This is not my stuff. I'm simply the steward of these resources that he's entrusted to me. And that changes everything when you have that mindset. It allows you to hold loosely to those things and make decisions not based on fear, but based on faith. And, that's tremendously freeing. And as we know, you can't outgive God, and these are his resources. And he always returns that blessing in multiple ways. And I think that's something that I hope people get from the book is this idea of stewardship.
Stewardship is, for some people, it might be a bit of a churchy word.
Mm.
And so, Justin, if someone's listening in and they're not quite sure what stewardship means, and you address it in your book, I think you do a great job there and you give great examples. But if someone were like going, what do you mean by stewardship? I think you described a little bit, but what do you mean by stewardship? Tell somebody what it really means in your words.
Yeah, it's that idea that we're not the owner. We're simply the steward. We're simply the caretaker. God owns it all. It's all his. We didn't generate any of this on our own. This is all from him. In fact, our very, waking up every day with breath in our lungs, that's a gift from him. And so really that idea of stewardship versus ownership, I think is at the core of your question. And it's really freeing, it's freeing in relationships. It's freeing in business. It's freeing in parenting. In every way, this being a caretaker and doing everything we can to steward those gifts well, I think is really the idea that we see in scripture. And, I'm just over the 50 mark, so I'm not young anymore. I like to think I'm not old either, but I've had enough life behind me to see that God is so faithful. And I think that's helpful to have some road in the rear view where you can say, yeah, this works. And this is the way God's created it to be.
Well, I use AI at times to do some descriptions and things like that. And the word that AI uses over and over again for people like you, like me, who's 10, 11 years older than you, is seasoned.
Yeah.
We're seasoned, which I think is a nice way of saying we're older, mature, or something like that. Justin, I am curious because I love the fact that y'all interviewed and you interact with a number of people. Can you think of any practical either day to day or just practical things that leaders do that reflect stewardship versus ownership?
Yeah. You see it in generosity. You see it in a business setting. We're talking about this idea that we're stewards, not owners. And the goal is to grow the company to God's glory and for God's impact. Changes your perspective, allows generosity, allows the organization to do so much more and to shine their light even brighter because they have a different mindset about their revenue and their priorities.
Yeah, I love you mentioned generosity because especially when money starts being factored in, you can learn a lot about
Mhm.
people when all of a sudden that comes into play. Along the way with your agency, this aspect of brand became important. Obviously, you've written the book Brand for Impact. And some might say, I'm going to give a counter that I may or may not believe, but I'm going to do it hopefully to agitate you to get a good response. Some might say that if you're doing it for the Lord or you're doing it for your mission or whatever, that you know what, brand isn't that important. How would
Yeah.
you respond if someone says, I'm not concerned about my brand? Brand isn't that important.
I would strongly disagree with that statement. You have stirred the hornet's nest. We live in a noisy world and we're called to share, ultimately, we're called to share God's love and God's truth and do it in a winsome way. With all of the noise, studies say we have over 10,000 marketing messages hitting us every day. How are you ever going to filter through all that noise and actually get someone to listen to what you're trying to say? Having a clarified brand is the most effective way to be heard. As Christ followers, we have a message that needs to be heard. If people can come in contact with these businesses that are putting God first and operating with excellence, those are the businesses that I believe should be heard. And so that's why writing this book was so important to me, to help those organizations clarify their brand so that they can rise above the commotion, above the noise, rise above the clutter, and really be known for what they do and ultimately what they believe so that they can have a greater kingdom impact. So brand is so important. And it's really one of the most cost effective ways for an organization to finally get an edge on the competition, if you will, to stand out and to be known. And it really just comes through consistency and frequency. And so if you can develop that brand that's unique, that stands, and then you're consistent in your delivery of that brand, that's going to make such a tremendous difference for any kind of business, nonprofit organization.
Tell me all the components of a brand. And while you're thinking about that, I'll give you a little bit of context. We have a title here at our podcast called Seek, Go, Create that means a great deal to me. There's an origin story and all that kind of stuff. But I've also found in the podcast world that listeners don't know what it means. There's the name, there's obviously the visuals, there's web presence, there's digital presence, all of those kind of things, I'm sure. Tell me all the components. What makes up a brand?
Yeah. A brand at its core at Grove 9, we say a brand is the one idea that people think of when they think of you. So it's not your logo, it's not your colors, it's not your fonts, it's not your website, it's not your social media presence. A brand is an idea, right? We talk about Michelin is such a great example of a consistent brand over time. Their tagline, because so much is riding on your tires, right? They've got the big puffy Michelin man who's caring and he's a protector. And you see these ads with dads putting their kids into a car, sending them off to college. They're putting Michelin's on that car because they love their kids. And the brand is safety. And over the past 100 years, everything Michelin has done has been consistently in line with that idea of safety. So now when you buy a minivan for your family, you're automatically going to consider putting Michelin's on your car, even though they're more expensive than another tire, because they've built that strong, clear brand of safety. And Whether it's true, we talk about the law of perception. There may be other products that are just as good or better than a Michelin tire, but the perception is that is a safe tire, and that tire will help you take care of your family. That's the power of a brand. The brand is not the logo. It's not the words. It's not the shoe and the wing for Goodyear. It's not the swoosh for Nike. It's the idea behind all of those things.
So, in all the work that you do and also the research you've done, what are 2 or 3 of the biggest mistakes you see people make related to their brand?
Well, I talked about consistency earlier, and I think one of the big mistakes is being inconsistent with the delivery of your brand, right? So sometimes you're talking about price, and sometimes you're talking about quality, and sometimes you're talking about other features. And if you're not consistently delivering one message, again, 10,000 messages hitting us every day, you're never going to stand out. There's a reason, research says that we need to see and hear something 7 to 12 times before it actually sticks. So consistency is really important when it comes to building a brand that stands out and gets attention. And really the second one is just taking the time to clarify your brand. When they think of your podcast, what do you want them to think of? Personal brands are the same. When they think of you, what do you want someone to think of? And if you don't clarify that brand and then deliver it consistently, people are going to make up whatever idea, whatever brand they want to about your organization or you as a person based on very little data. So it's our job to develop that brand that's going to be unique, and we're going to deliver that brand in a creative, effective way consistently over time.
Right. So, I'm gonna put you on the spot just a little bit here. I know probably being a guest here, you probably glanced at a few things of our podcast and possibly me. Hit me hard here, Justin. What are some things that you went, "Oh, doing okay with that," and then, "Ooh, not so good with that"? Go ahead, man. I'm ready for it. Give me some feedback.
That's really unfair. I would love to spend time with you talking about this. I think visually, you've been pretty consistent with the delivery of your brand. I think that there definitely are some things you're doing well, and consistency, I think, is pretty strong as well. I think that, that idea of what does, what does what does the organization really do best? And what do you want people to think of when they think of you? Because you offer, a wide array of services to people. And even your podcast has, so many interesting guests from all these different fields. But what's the thread? What's the one thing that you want people to get? Like if I give Tim an hour of my time, this is what I know I'm going to get in return. And I think that's really the important thing is to put a word to it. Coca-Cola, their brand for forever has been happiness. And they've committed to say that when people think of drinking a Coke, they're going to think of smiling and joy and happiness. And everything you've seen has been people enjoying the time with each other, drinking Coca-Cola. And I don't know if that beverage actually brings joy to a person scientifically or physically, but from a branding perspective, they've done a really good job of telling us that that's the result we can expect when we crack open a Coke. So I think that's really my best advice is really figure out what that one idea is. And then that you can infuse that into everything. Um, there's an app on my phone that I love. It's called Evernote. And in a perfect world, you develop this brand idea before you actually even name your company or your podcast or your nonprofit. And then you can infuse that brand into the name and into the logo and into the website and into everything that you do. So Evernote, it says what it does. It's a place for your notes, and they're going to be there forever. It's brilliant. The logo is an elephant with a little dog ear like a page. Why is it an elephant? Because elephants never forget, right? So everything about the brand says longevity and permanency and safety. And it's just a brilliant example of how all the elements of a brand can come together in a very straight line and create that idea that this is the best place to put your notes, to put your thoughts.
That's good. When you were talking about Coca-Cola, I'm from Atlanta, so I'm fully aware of
Yeah.
this. I'm pretty sure that the happiness came from when they were putting cocaine in those drinks. Maybe
It
not.
might
I
have
don't know.
been.
Everybody was, boy, these people are happy. Now it's probably just the sugar and other stuff. I used to love having me a good old Coca-Cola about once or twice a day, and I cut that out a few years before I was your age. It might have been one of the best things I did. As much as I love
For sure.
Coca-Cola, I'm not sure that it's healthy for us. One of the things, and I appreciate the feedback, by the way, and I know I did put you on the spot, and you probably didn't want to just slice and dice me right here, being a guest. But one of the things, and I don't know if this is something I'm sort of cynical about or whatever, but one of the things that I observe is that we have quite the celebrity culture in the world that we're in today. And I observe, and I don't know if this is a correct or incorrect observation, that there seem to be different rules for people that have a celebrity brand. And so I'd love just if you've got thoughts or anything, because there's what I'd call an average Joe business guy building it from the ground up or whatever, and then there's someone who's already famous, well known, as if they can almost do anything without some of the principles that we're talking about. So does that make any sense? I guess just speak to a little bit of personal and or celebrity branding that we see quite a bit if anyone jumps on any social media platform.
Yeah. I actually, interestingly, I think that we're seeing a shift where celebrity brands almost have more freedom to express their faith, right? Steph Curry has Bible verse on his shoe. Almost every, not almost every, many of the post championship interviews that we watch athletes give, they give glory to God first and foremost. They're not ashamed to put their faith out there, even if it were to hurt their personal brand, which it doesn't. It enhances their brand. It draws me to certain quarterbacks in the NFL because I know that they're men of faith. They're not ashamed to say Jesus won, right? It's on the t-shirt. It's just, I think that's really been interesting to me to see so many celebrities use their platform and their celebrity to express their faith. And I think the business world, the average Joe can take a cue from that and say, if these guys with so much at stake are willing to share their faith in a very public way, why am I so hesitant to do that in my business?
So we got a few minutes left here, and I want to talk more about your book, but I also want to give maybe some practical things that some people listening in. I know that we have listeners that are operating for profit, and then I also know we have ministry people that are operating in the nonprofit. Some actually have both too, by the way. What are some things that you can give? And I know get the book is the best tip, but what are a few tips you can give to either both categories together, or if you want to split them out, that's fine too. But give some tips on your brand for both the for-profit and nonprofit business or organization leader.
I think the most important tip, this is where we start with all of our organizations that we serve. We want to help them clarify their brand, right? We have an intentional research and strategic process to help them decide what that idea should be. You don't just want to pick it out of the air. You want it to be strategic. It should be a promise that you can keep, that's true to who you are. And it should also be as unique among your competition as possible, right? It's less expensive and more effective to have a unique brand than it is to compete with 10 other organizations for that same idea. When you're doing that, you just really need to outspend them or be so creative that people think of you instead of the competition. So the most important thing is to take the time, do the research, really understand what your brand idea should be, what your brand platform should be, and then start to build everything on top of that. So that's where we start with 90% of the clients that we serve. We almost won't execute creative without doing that foundational work on the front end. And that's really, really very important.
Do you have, I guess, companies or organizations come to you and say something to the effect of, "Hey, we want you to do some Facebook stuff for us,"
Yeah, absolutely.
which is not
And we
necessarily
have that same
strategic.
conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Um,
We can help you, we can help you spend your money, but if you want to be a good steward of those resources, you should do this first. You should do the homework, go through the framework and clarify your brand, come up with measurable, specific objectives based on that brand, and then decide which strategies make most sense for your business. It may not be Facebook stuff. It may be something else.
right. Justin, what I do, I work with leadership teams and work on strategy and being strategic. And my observation is that many businesses that we would term successful have, in many ways, I don't want to say they've stumbled onto that success, but that success has evolved. It hasn't been necessarily intentional. I hate to say that they got lucky. There's some that have. And so one of the things I attempt to do is work with them and being more proactive as opposed to reactive, which involves a lot of strategy. I'm curious how many organizations, we'll call it, not just businesses, but organizations, how many organizations come to you and you just sort of scratch your head and say, they don't really know who they are, or they really don't have strategy. And I don't know if it's a percentage or a number of that. So, but do you see that very often?
All the time. In fact, that's more common than not.
Does it make you go, huh, how did they get to this level of success?
Yeah, it really does. And, it's, you've seen it many times working with organizations, especially small to mid-sized organizations. They saw a need in the marketplace. They developed a product or service to meet that need, and they just continued to grow. And they really never did the work of building a foundation that's going to take them to the next level. So they're always going to have incremental growth, but they're not going to have that more significant growth. And more importantly, we call it the triple bottom line, the economic, social, and spiritual impact that their business or their organization could have once they do that foundational work, that strategy work.
I notice a lot that they just have a tremendous work ethic so they could grind it out. They may have been at the right place at the right time, or they may have saw a need and they, met that need, but yet they get to a place where they are looking to do something different. The word you use, and I've got your book up here again, I'll hold it up so people that are watching the video can see brand for impact. You've got two big words in this book title. I want to read to the subtitle, a proven blueprint to help faith-driven leaders clarify their brand, grow their revenue, and make a greater impact. There's a lot in that subtitle that's really good, but the word brand and impact, those are two big words. Talk about the word impact, because I see it thrown around quite a bit. People say, oh, I want to make an impact. I interview a lot of people here. Success to me is making an impact and things like that. And obviously, you believe it's a big word because it's included in your title. So talk about impact and what that means to you.
Yeah, you're right. It has become a bit of a buzzword lately, but impact is resonance. It's it's changing things in a way that resonates and has, it starts small, but it has a tremendous influence, a tremendous impact as it resonates outward. And, that's really why we talk about, Simon Sinek has the golden circle, and it's the what, the how, and the why. And most organizations, the outside of the bullseye is the what you do. Many organizations are good at talking about what they do. And then how you do it, that starts to get a little more interesting and maybe starts to set you apart. But there may be a lot of people who do it the way you do it. But the why is in the bullseye for him. And that's the emotional connection that you make with your customers. That's what gets you up in the morning. And when people connect with that, they resonate with that. That's really what's going to create brand loyalty. We just flipped his circle upside down and said, let's put the what in the middle. Let's put the how on the next circle. And then let's put the why in the biggest circle. And then we're going to radiate out from there because the why makes the most difference. And when people connect with your why, especially from a faith perspective, talking about, whether Chick-fil-A has the best chicken sandwich or not, that may be up for debate. I don't know. But the truth is that people of faith want to support the organization because of what it stands for and because their values and beliefs align with the organization's values and beliefs. And that's tremendously powerful. And so I think when an organization can understand how to incorporate their faith and their belief into their brand in a way that's not cheesy, it's not salesy, it's not disingenuine, but in a way that's really genuine and that's creative and that's interesting. That's when people say, I love that. That connects to my soul. That's something that I want to be a part of. And whether those socks are better than these socks, I believe in the story behind these socks. And I believe in that everyone should have a pair of socks. And I love that. And so I'm going to pay more for your product. And that's impact, right? That's making a difference all over the world. And I think that's such a cool thing that we have the opportunity to do through the arena of business and nonprofit is have this tremendous impact today and obviously ultimately for eternity. That's our bottom line. That's why we do what we do. And, we're called for the Great Commission, right? To make disciples. And I think that's ultimately business is such a great way to do that. And I think so many people are missing out on the opportunity to have more impact and have more influence, and more fully fulfill the Great Commission in their lives and in their work.
At your agency, I believe, if I'm understanding it correctly, you could correct me if I'm wrong. Y'all obviously help people with the clarity and their purpose and things like that. But I think you also do what I would call some of the granular, tactical things, website design and campaigns and things like that. Is there one of those that you enjoy more than the other at this stage of your career?
It's a great question. No one's ever asked me that.
It's not a trick question, and
We
no one's
developed-
listened to, oh my God, Justin just said he hates doing websites. He just wants to do clarity with people.
No.
No, I mean, but yeah, I'm just curious because we do evolve.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious because the book really spoke more of the clarity message than the application message. So
Yeah,
that's why I was wondering, which one speaks to you more now?
that's a great question. The reason it's challenging is because once you do the clarity, you get to express that in all of the mediums, in the website, in the logo, in the social media, in the email marketing, in the billboards, in the public relations, in the swag, in the signage, like it's everywhere. And so that first piece, that fundamental brand clarification and that strategy, that's so pivotal to everything else being effective. But I would say if I had to pick one, we build identities, we create logos for organizations. And the logo is, you talked about the pecking order earlier. The logo is pretty high up in the pecking order when it comes to the thing that influences the other visual elements of a brand. So I would say that designing logos that, again, they don't just look good, but they have objective criteria for why they work. They're on brand, therefore they're going to be so much more effective than just simply, hey, the founder loves, you know, golden retrievers. And so we knew we had golden retriever in the logo. Like, what? Why? What does that have to do with anything? Or the business initials, right? Just having two letters creatively joined together in the name of a logo is fine and interesting, but it could be so much more. And I think I get pretty excited about designing logos that really express the brand platform in a powerful and effective way. When you look at Goodyear tires, their brand is really about performance and speed, right? And they've got the running shoe with the wing, and it's this idea of speed and performance, and that's powerful, right? It's so much more powerful than maybe just a G and a Y put together in an interesting way. So I think there's lots of research you can do on hidden meanings and logos, and sometimes it's a little too subtle and people don't actually get it. But Amazon has the smile, and it goes from A to Z, and it says we do everything from A to Z, and we're going to give you really excellent customer service that's going to make you happy at the same time. And so I think there's designing an identity and a logo that incorporates the brand is really fun.
One thing that came to me, I was smiling, maybe not chuckling, but I see people often that are newer business, maybe, I don't know. I actually see some more experience that they feel very strongly about putting LLC or Inc. or, and I've got an LLC now, so I need to put it, which I'm not sure. We don't need to go into that discussion. But the thing that came to me earlier when you were speaking is that my guess is that someone has that clarity. Then the rest of it is, I don't want to say it's easy, but maybe it's simpler or it is easier. I mean, would that be accurate?
Yeah. The decision-making process is much easier, right? It goes from being subjective to being objective. And so now we have actual data informing the decisions that we make. And we don't just have to take a vote and see which logo everyone likes best. We can actually say, these three options are all on brand, on target. They're going to be effective for you. And now we can let our preferences take over and say, hey, we love the way this one looks, but they all meet the criteria. And we wouldn't put it in front of a client as an option if it didn't meet the criteria.
Justin, you say that the book is to help faith-driven leaders in the tagline here. I've used that term faith-driven leaders before. Sometimes I wonder if people really know what that means. How do you define faith-driven leaders?
Yeah, it's a person of faith who has we talk about it as a Christ follower, someone who lives by the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, and they desire to live those things out in their family, in their business, in their life. And so, that drives our personal core values and the way we act and the content of our character. And the idea behind the book is to challenge and equip them to do that in their business and their organization as well. And to give some really, really cool, really practical examples of other businesses who have been really successful in doing that very same thing.
Justin, go ahead and let people know how they can connect with you at Grove 9 or get the book. And go ahead, while you're doing it, tell people who should probably reach out to you. Let's just say someone's listening in, some of the things you've said resonate with them and they might want to connect. Go ahead and tell them who should reach out to you and give all your information so that they know where to do that.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Really, organizations that desire to develop that triple bottom line, to have economic, social, and spiritual flourishing within their organization, if it's a nonprofit, within their community, within the people that they serve. If they want to make a greater impact, if they want to grow, if they want to reach more people with the products and services that they offer, that's really who should reach out to us. We say if you have a purpose bigger than just profit, we're probably a good fit to work together. And ours is our values revolve really around those kingdom purposes, and that's that's really a great fit for us. And I think that synergy between the shared values really creates an advantage, and it helps us help those organizations because we have that shared foundation, we have that shared purpose, we have that connection, and that's part of our brand, right? That's why we named our company Grove Nine. Fruit grows in a grove, and the fruit of the spirit, there are 9 of them. And we thought the first one is love. So let's make our logo the shape of a heart. And we were able to incorporate the G and the 9 into the shape of the heart. And, it lets us tell our story, lets us say, this is important to us. And if your organization values those same things, then let's have a conversation. We think we can help you do more good in the world based on that shared connection. Our website is grove9.com, GROVE number 9.com. My website is justineklund.com, JUSTINEKLUND.com. You can connect with me at either of those places. You can buy the book on Amazon. I really didn't write the book to sell books. I wrote the book to challenge and equip these faith-driven leaders and organizations to make a greater impact through their business and see those 3 types of flourishing, right? The economic, the social, and the spiritual. And I think that's what God's called me to do, to help faith-driven leaders make a greater impact. And I pray that this book will really be helpful in that.
I think I told you that I read it and got it on Kindle here, and I enjoyed it. It's a good read. It's not a complicated read, which I think is good and healthy for a lot of leaders in today's world. And I love the stories you're interspersed throughout of what I would term, and I think you did too, they're faith-driven leaders. Justin, did I miss anything? We're butting up against our time here, but is there anything else you just wanted to say or share at all before we wrap up and close it down?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and for what you do consistently. I think the faithfulness in your podcast and just the work that goes on behind the scenes to really help organizations bring their faith and their work together is so important. And so very grateful that you're doing this work. And it's been a pleasure to be on the podcast and just hopefully share a little bit of what we do. I think the uniqueness of Brand for Impact and what we do at Grove 9 is that we've taken this very popular, praise the Lord, this idea of faith and work is gaining momentum, right? There are organizations that we just see this tremendous growth in this. People are saying, yeah, this is important. We want to do this. And look at all these other business leaders who are doing it also. And so I think our agency and this book really brings that into the idea of marketing and branding, where that hasn't been the idea. Many faith-driven leaders are saying, I can do this in my business. And we're saying, here's how you do it in your marketing.
It helps with that you brought up earlier, which is the courage, helps build confidence so that people can go out and do it. Justin Eklund, thanks for joining us. The book is Brand for Impact. I'm going to read this tagline again. Really good. A proven blueprint to help faith-driven leaders clarify their brand, grow their revenue, and make a greater impact. Get that book. It'll be helpful for you. Thanks again, Justin, for joining us. We've got new episodes here at Seek, Go, Create every Monday. Like I mentioned earlier, I believe next week's episode with Ken Gosnell is going to be a great partner episode to this one because there's stewardship conversation, there's how to do business and how to be a steward in the marketplace. So make sure you're listening in, subscribe, leave us reviews, all that kind of stuff. So appreciate you being here. We'll see you next week on Seek, Go, Create.